Good news for your car tires. The state says road maintenance will be top priority in the next 5 years.
Roughly, the investment we have put into the transportation system here in Arizona is about $18.5 billion for the highway system. We feel it's our responsibility to the taxpayers to protect that investment.
Now the bad news. There's less money for road expansion to ease traffic congestion, and that means the need for new funding sources.
The way that we're funding it through the gas tax is no longer working. It can't keep up with the changes that we've made in our vehicles. So we have to find a different way of funding our infrastructure improvements.
Our transportation system on the road to perdition or paradise. It's Arizona Week.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support.
Once again, your moderator, Michael Chiha.
Every year, state transportation officials update priorities based on needs and funding. That process is now underway, and the state is seeking cuts of $350 million from previously planned projects by 2017. We look at the issues in a series of interviews, starting with State Department of Transportation Director John Halikowski. Your agency announced recently that it is undergoing dramatic changes in the way it sets transportation priorities for Arizona. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, Arizona historically, Michael, has been a state of expansion when it comes to transportation infrastructure. And what we find ourselves in now is a situation where our revenues are shrinking and we're no longer able to expand at the rates that we had previously done so. Essentially, we're adopting a fix-it-first program to ensure that we maintain and preserve the infrastructure we have on the ground.
I'd like to return to the maintenance issues in a minute or two, but first, why are we in the state we're in? It's a financial issue, obviously, right?
Well, essentially, there are three sources that fund transportation projects in Arizona. There's one that viewers are probably most familiar with, which is gasoline tax. There's a state and a federal tax. There's also a vehicle license tax, which you pay at the time of car registration. Those are probably the two big major funding sources. And of course, then there are federal funds that we get from the federal gasoline taxes that are collected and other minor motor vehicle funds that fees that people pay.
And in this fiscal year, what do those add up to?
Probably this fiscal year, what we're looking at collecting is roughly $1.2 billion.
And now we're seeing that pool of money shrink for a variety of reasons. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Well, certainly. Let me take gasoline tax first. Arizona's gasoline taxes are not indexed, which means they're not subject to inflation. The rate of 18 cents per gallon state tax was set in 1992, and it has not been raised since. So when you factor in inflation and fuel economy, because the new federal CAFE standards for vehicles coming out in 2016 is 55 miles per gallon, and the fact that people are turning to more alternative sources of fuel or power for the vehicles, you see that gas tax nationwide has been shrinking. The vehicle license tax, which is the other main driver, we saw that fall with the economy. In 2007, 2008, Arizonans were buying nearly 500,000 cars a year. They're now buying roughly 50% of that. So that, coupled with the fact that vehicle license tax depreciates every year, we see a shrinking pool of VLT money.
People keeping their cars longer, and thus the value of them goes down.
Right.
And what they have to pay the state to license them goes down.
Right. And then the third source we had mentioned, the federal funds, we're seeing that because of the highway trust fund problems, given the shrinking gas tax on the federal level, we see less federal appropriations to the states.
The answer seems simple, just raise the gasoline tax or index it to the rate of inflation. But it isn't that simple, is it?
I don't believe so, and the reason why is that gasoline tax is just not the workhorse that it used to be. Obviously, a gasoline tax was established back in the 1950s to help build the interstate system, and that funding tool worked pretty well then. But you can't take a 1950s model into the new century and expect that gasoline tax, given all of the issues that we're facing with fuel economy and the fact that the state's share is beginning to shrink from the federal government, is going to answer that problem.
Are there any states that are trying alternative methods of funding transportation, or What do you see as alternatives to what we do here in Arizona now?
Well, I think that we're going to have to look at a variety of different funding sources, and that they're going to have to be diverse, because what we've seen is that because of the economy and what it does, both the vehicle license tax and gas tax, that those funds are not necessarily something we can count on to weather through good times and bad. So what some states have begun to explore, such as Oregon and Washington State, they've been running some pilot programs on a vehicle miles traveled tax. In essence, you pay a certain amount based on the number of vehicles that you drive. That has been looked at by a number of states and across the country. That's one possible solution. Other states have gone to a combination of raising gasoline taxes, using perhaps some sort of sales tax, or a combination of different types of vehicle registration fees.
So the reality is that funding's an issue. What do you see as far as changes in the funding formulas goes?
Well, I think in Arizona that there's a lot of discussion based on the fact that the state's really at a pivotal point when we look into the future in Arizona's place in trade and the economy, and the fact that people want to have jobs and a good economy. A transportation system is really central to having that. And so I think there's a lot of discussion about whether gasoline tax is the appropriate mechanism, whether a vehicle miles traveled tax is appropriate. I know that Senator Farley has introduced a bill to establish a committee at the legislature to look at all of the different funding sources.
When you've told state legislators what you're doing and how you're changing these priorities, what kind of a reception and reaction did you get from them?
Well, I think they understand, because I think that the legislature has been at the forefront of dealing with the fact that the state overall has had declining revenues. And there's been a lot of tough choices that the legislature has had to make, whether it's with education, healthcare funding, or other types of social service issues. So I think there's understanding on their part, but they are still very cautious about what kind of funding sources we might utilize in the future and whether those would be something that they would enact into law.
Let's talk a little bit about those maintenance issues. What is involved there as you make this change from expansion, as you call it, to much more emphasis on maintenance of roads?
Well, I think if you're talking in lane miles, we've probably got 27,000 lane miles of state highway system to take care of. So it's quite a pretty extensive system, and we have a lot of different varied weather conditions, as you know, in Arizona. So there's the issue of that, but then what it comes back to is the fact that 76% of our program roughly used to be an expansion of the system. Now we're seeing about that same percentage going into maintenance in order to preserve the investment we have on the ground. Roughly, the investment we have put into the transportation system here in Arizona is about $18.5 billion for the highway system. We feel it's our responsibility to the taxpayers to protect that investment.
Now for how we fund highways and roads. Two elected officials who are members of legislative transportation committees, Representative Victoria Steele, a Tucson Democrat, and Senator Steve Pierce, a Prescott Republican. The state is in the midst of updating its 5-year transportation plan, and what we're finding is that there's not enough money to cover the needed projects because the funding formula hasn't changed in decades. Do you see a need to change that formula?
Absolutely. The system that we have for funding our transportation system it's inadequate, it's antiquated. We've had the 18% gas tax or 18-cent gas tax since 1988, almost 25 years. And the situation with our cars being more fuel economy driven, they're not paying as much into that gas tax. So, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the funding is reliant on that gas tax. And if that's not there, then we don't have the money to have road construction, and that's a problem.
It's a problem because the revenues are decreasing with more efficient cars. We're going to have to work on that with the private sector. It's not just the state can't say this is what we're going to do. We need to be working with people. There was a bill that was introduced to put a huge group together to start working on that. But it was unwieldy in the size of it and the scope of it. What we need is a smaller group to work with the private sector and come up with some solutions. I think we can do that. Just how, I don't know what it's going to be, but we need to be working on this. Our roads are deteriorating, and we need to be on top of this, especially in rural Arizona. It's tough. When you have to go from point A to point B like I do, it's 100 miles just to get to Prescott, another 25 miles to get to my house. And the roads are, they're falling apart. We need to be working on them.
What does this do for business development in Arizona? Is that the key issue here?
Oh no, that's not the key issue, but it's one issue that we need to be working on. There's Interstate 15 that goes across the northwest corner of Arizona. There's 20-some bridges in there. There's no commerce from Arizona at all. Those bridges are deteriorating. They were originally built with federal money. Now it's up to the state to find a way to maintain those bridges and put them into a better state of repair.
What kind of change do you see as needed? Should it go to a percentage? Should it go to some other kind of a user tax or a user fee for roads?
Oh, you really want me to use the T word? I don't know that we need to change the system the way it is. I think we need to look for other alternatives. I think we need to really, what I'd like to see is that we have a task force, a study group, that we actually bring people together and we start looking at what do we need to make infrastructure improvements in Arizona, and how do we fund that? Because the way that we're funding it through the gas tax is no longer working. It can't keep up with the changes that we've made in our vehicles. So we have to find a different way of funding our infrastructure improvements.
We've got to maintain what we have, and then we've got to find new funding for new ways of doing roads. For example, there's public-private partnerships on a new freeway. It's Interstate 11 that would connect Phoenix to Las Vegas. Well, they're looking at new ways to fund that. Down from Tucson, Interstate 19 going down to Nogales to the new Mariposa Port of Entry. When that's built, that's going to increase traffic. We need to look at ways to fund that, to get that road so that those vegetables can come out of Nogales and get on back east or wherever they're going. Yeah, that's a huge thing for Arizona. That's billions of dollars. 60% of Mexico's winter vegetables come in through that port, and come in, they either go to Interstate 10 east and west, or they go on up to Interstate 40 east and west. And it's we've got to find new ways, and there's good people at ADOT and good people here, good minds, and we're going to find ways to do this.
When you mentioned public-private partnership, perhaps for Interstate 11, which would connect Phoenix and Las Vegas, are you talking about perhaps a toll road of some sort?
It could be a toll road. People get alarmed when you say toll road, but that's not on roads that are already built. This would be a whole new road, and it'd be, as they've done in other states, a way to fund it, to get it built, and then over a period of time it becomes public again. So it's just a way to get it built. If we don't have the money, the economy's bad, it's a way for us to function.
And it's the equivalent of a use tax, right? Because the users are paying it.
I think I don't want to call it a tax, but it's a fee you'd have to pay for the right to use the road.
You talked about a formation of a task force. Does that mean that we won't see any changes this year, or at least in some kind of short-term proposition?
I don't expect that we will be. There's no legislation that I know of that has been introduced this year that addresses the funding for infrastructure improvements.
Consistently, businesses say one of their top needs is a good transportation system. The president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce tells why. Here's Todd Sanders. In the grander scheme of things, how important is a good transportation system for the business community?
Well, it's critical for the business community, and and there are a lot of facets to that answer. Certainly, when you talk about workforce, that's one area where a good transportation system is front and center. You need to get not only customers to your door, but you need to be able to get your workforce to your door. I can think of a few companies here in the Valley, when they think about where they want to be, what they do is they actually pinpoint their company, draw a radius around that, because they know that that's the radius where they can actually bring people in. Beyond that point, they believe we're not going to be able to draw people in. So to have an effective transportation system to get people into the door, not only as a workforce but as a customer, is really important to the business community. Aside from that, we've seen that there's an economic development component to that. If you look at our light rail system here, we were sort of late to the game in terms of light rail. Obviously, there's a transportation play there, but where that that corridor has gone, where you've seen those tracks laid, has had a huge impact in terms of economic development, which is something that I don't know that people had focused on. Same thing with some of the freeways here in the outlying areas where there had sort of been more residential type of communities, and as the freeways came in, businesses came in, and you really saw a lot of economic development and a lot of good activity.
So is the infrastructure for transportation in the Phoenix metro area keeping pace with business needs?
I think it is today. I think in 2004, there was a sales tax increase, and I wasn't at the chamber at the time, but the chamber supported that. We were big supporters of that. We believe that you need to make those investments. So from that perspective, we're doing well. I think from an overall perspective, if you look at the state, though, we're running into some problems. So if you talk to Director Halikowski, one of the issues I think we're having is we have a gas tax that was set, I think, back in the 80s, and it's 17 cents per gallon. And certainly in the 80s, that was a much different proposition than it is today. I think if you look at it maybe in terms of inflation, that equals to about 8 cents per gallon today. You have inflation, plus you have more fuel-efficient vehicles, which really means that in terms of transportation dollars, what we're able to do is obviously much less than we need. So we're maintaining. We're safe, but in terms of the future, we're going to need to really look at this and say, how can we expand it? How can we look at future growth and plan for it today so that we can have a system that works tomorrow?
Well, especially as you say, based on economic development and economic growth, and that's the big push in Arizona and everywhere coming out of the recession.
Sure.
What are we going to do to be able to support an expanded transportation system? Do we need to change that funding model you made reference to?
I think we do, and I think there are a lot of folks looking at that. Partially, we need to not only look at what we want to do in terms of changing it, but for instance, one of the things the Chamber's been very active in is making sure that those transportation dollars that come in are actually going to transportation. Due to the budget crisis here in the state for the last few years, a lot of those dollars have been what we call shifted or redirected into the general fund and not gone to transportation, which has been a big problem. So we've been focused on that, but certainly in terms of what's happening in Maricopa County, I think we need to look at what's going to happen with our local tax, as well as from a statewide perspective, how do we want to do that? And I think we have to look at it really strategically, and we have to look at it from a multimodal perspective as well. But certainly, I think that people have their eye on that ball, and I can tell you that the Chamber is going to be very actively engaged in that conversation.
Talk a little bit about the Chamber's activity in that regard. You obviously have a transportation committee that works on these issues with city, county, and state officials?
Absolutely. There is engagement here with the city in a big way, and certainly when the local question was asked here of the voters, the Chamber was very active in that discussion. At the state level, another area where we're very actively engaged, the governor's office with the Department of Transportation and Director Halikowski and his team, as well as the legislature. As I mentioned, the biggest focus for us in the past few years has been how do we protect those dollars that are essentially transportation dollars from going somewhere else to fill a different hole. So in the short term, that's where we've been very engaged. In the longer term, I know we'll be working with Mayor Stanton here locally and the council, as well as MAG. And then, of course, as we look at a statewide model, we'll be working with the ADOT and our policymakers along with the governor to really figure out how we can do it strategically, and not only do it for the needs of today, but really looking at tomorrow. If we're going to continue to grow, we're going to need a plan for it.
Is the business community willing to pay for the transportation needs that Arizona will have in the future?
Well, I can tell you that our track record is that we have been willing to do that. Now, there have been instances where there have been plans out there that we believe don't necessarily meet the needs of the business community or weren't necessarily written in the way that we thought would be best for the business community and our local community. But from a broader perspective, yes, I think that they see that as an investment. The business community understands that you've got to invest in order to have some sort of return.
And what do you see happening in the near term, short term? What influence will the Chamber try to have on the state's 5-year transportation plan, which is now being decided on?
Right. Well, we'll be engaged on that. We have a full-time team that's dedicated to the state legislature. Certainly, John Halikowski, Director Halikowski, is in here on a regular basis talking to our transportation committee. They're very interested in what happens, and certainly interested in where we can be a part of that discussion, because we are a big consumer of what comes out of that plan.
One industry in particular is paying attention to the shifting priorities in state transportation. That's the road building and paving industry. The executive director of the Tucson Utility Contractors Association spoke with me about it. Ramon Ganders, thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
What's the current state of the economy as far as the contracting industry is concerned? Are you in recovery from the recession?
I think we're still in a modest recovery. Our members rely both on public and private sector work. So right now we're still recovering on the private sector side. We're swinging the pendulum a little bit to that side, but our public sector work is still a majority of where we are today.
Have you seen a change in the numbers of businesses that exist in the contracting industry as a result of the recession and the aftermath?
I'd say yes and no. There's a lot of folks that are still here. They may have downsized or they may have grouped with another company. And so I think we're still seeing a little bit of a slow recovery with businesses that are still coming out of the recession that are not quite sure where they're going to be, and they rely specifically on projects that may be coming down the line. So when they're bidding on projects, they're relying on that. So we're still seeing a little bit of a we're uncertain stage for them.
And what share of your membership is devoted to public infrastructure issues, specifically roads and bridges, which is what we're talking about?
I'd say a good 95% of our guys are. We have folks that do just both. So they rely on the public sector work, but they also rely on the private sector work. And because we're in the stage that we're still doing a lot of public sector work, a lot of the members are involved in the public sector work. So it's still kind of one of those areas that we find that members are trying to find themselves to do more private sector work, but the economy needs to recover.
Now, what we're seeing at the state level, as we've heard described by the transportation director, is a swing from construction and expansion to maintenance. Mm-hmm. How will that affect your members?
Well, it will impact them a little bit. It won't impact them to where they won't be doing any work, because some of that work will still be bid to our members. So they'll still have the chance to do work. However, because we're not doing the heavy highway construction, the projects then become a little less valuable in terms of the amount that they could make a profit. And so we unfortunately have been seeing that swing because of the way the economy has gone, the funding that has dwindled over the past couple of years. We're seeing more to a recovery with roads, fixing what's not been repaired, rather than repairing the roads that we do need to get involved. And that's a separate conversation, but certainly we'll still be doing work. It just won't be the work that they're looking for and used to doing on a daily basis.
And what impact does that have on the number of jobs that there are in the industry and the number of skilled jobs? Because, of course, the skilled jobs pay more. Do maintenance jobs require less skill, and thus is there a shift there?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because we're right now learning more and more about the fact that we're losing skilled labor. We're in fact going elsewhere to find that skilled labor. Not only that, we're going to other states to do work because that's where the work is. And so what we're finding is, because we have less skilled labor, it's putting more pressure and more pressure on the contracting industry. So sometimes it relies them not to bid on certain projects or do certain work because they don't have the labor to do it, or the employees to do it.
And do you know numbers of jobs that there might be in the industry that are affected by this shift?
Well, it really depends on the type of company, because a lot of companies do specific infrastructure work. So I think we would have to ask each one how they're doing. But what I'm hearing from the industry is that in certain cases, they've lost 50% of their employment since last year. Some others are staying stable. But what we're also seeing is that we're not employing the employees as well as we did in years past, where they may have benefit packages and other things that we can offer them to keep them here, to keep their family stable, and put money back into our economy. And so it varies in particular industry and type of company you are with, but I think overall I would say it's pretty stable. But we haven't really seen much, unfortunately, to the positive, where we're gaining more employees. We're actually probably losing more employees.
The issue here obviously is money and funding at the state level and at the public level. You told me before we came before the camera that you were in Phoenix last week talking to state officials about that whole aspect of it. Give us a little briefing on what you found out there.
Well, over the last 12 years, the state legislature has actually swept $1.6 billion worth of highway user revenue fund. That's comprised of a couple of things, but one of them is gas tax.
Taking it away from the highway.
Taking it away from the highway, sweeping it to some other fund that they feel is necessary. And because of that, the monies that we've lost have been lost to the end user, which are the roads. And so what we've heard over the past couple of years, but also last week, is that our legislature is not willing to take a step into the direction of trying to fund transportation. They want to find new avenues and are really putting it onto the burden of the industry. And what we're going to find ourselves in is probably doing more maintenance work now than worried about some of the projects that also need to be complete to help expand our infrastructure. And so what it's leaving us to do is trying to find with those avenues is other work, other possibilities. And so what we're going to be doing is probably commissioning a study that's going to look at all avenues of revenue that we can get that's not related to the Highway User Revenue Fund that the state legislature holds the purse strings to. And so what other opportunities are there? Well, there could be taxes on rental cars or other things of that nature that we can gain some dollars, put it back into our infrastructure, expand it, keep projects moving on time that's been projected for years from the Arizona Department of Transportation in the city and the county. So there's a lot of steps, but I think we're going to have to look at new avenues.
You mentioned the word taxes. We have just about a half a minute remaining. You mentioned the word taxes, and as we saw, a couple legislators didn't even want to use the word, or they rejected the use of the word. What does the public need to know, very briefly, about how these projects are funded and how the public needs to step up on them?
50% of our dollars from the Arizona Department of Transportation that comes to Tucson comes from Washington, D.C. Because we're losing the gas tax on the federal level, the buying power, it's given us less here in the state of Arizona and down to Tucson. What they need to know is that right now, the current state of our governments are not willing to or have not been willing to fund transportation and infrastructure. So we're going to see in the future we're going to have to come up with new things that the council and our governments are going to have to swallow in terms of new ideas.
Ramon Ganders, Executive Director of the Tucson Utility Contractors Association, thanks for speaking with me.
Thank you.
See a longer version of my interview with ADOT's John Halikowski on our website, azpm.org, and a link to the 5-year transportation plan. That's our program for Friday, March 22nd, 2013. Next Friday, yet another financially fraught topic for state taxpayers, the precarious state of public pension funds. For Arizona Week, I'm Michael Chihak.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support.